Ladies and gentleballs, please give a warm welcome to musician and author David J. Haskins from Bauhaus, Love and Rockets, and tons of other projects. Thanks
Hello.
for coming on the show, man.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Ball.
I was going to do a video about Bela Lugosi's dead, and for research, I was reading your book, Who Killed Mr. Moonlight.
Uh-huh.
There's a link in the description. Who Killed Mr. Moonlight, Bauhaus, Black Magic, and Benediction. Let's jump into it. Early influences. So tell me about the first record you ever bought.
Well, the first album I ever bought was Reggae Chartbusters Volume 2.
From Trojan Records.
Yes, indeed.
You said something about like David Ansel Collins' song "Double Barrel" and
That
that
was the
like
thing. That was the
Daniel.
first single I ever purchased. Yeah, and the same as Daniel. We found out later when we were talking about records that Daniel Ash bought the same single
Yeah,
as his first single. Yeah,
and it
yeah.
was really cool to find that because your influences are also varied. Like you played funk and disco and stuff like that.
The only reason that I was playing funk and disco was that I was going to go to Germany to play with a covers band in the late 70s, and it was all that kind of music. American air bases in Germany. This was in 1978, and just prior to
Yeah.
my leaving, Daniel asked me to join what would become Bauhaus. So I didn't go to Germany. I stayed in England and did that instead. Formed a band with a German name.
I read in your book that the first song Peter was going to perform with you guys was "Knock on Wood," like a soul classic.
That came about because I was in another band. This was before Bauhaus got together, called The Craze. We were playing a gig and Peter was coming along, and Daniel said that this old schoolmate of his was going to be in attendance, and he wanted to sing a song. So we were trying to think of a cover he could do, and that one came to mind. In the end, Peter did not. He chickened out.
Right, he left when he heard the band.
He didn't even hear us. He just saw us and left.
Oh man,
um,
why did he leave? Did you guys look that bad?
this was my idea, and I thought it was quirky at the time. I spotted in the corner of our makeshift dressing room a stack of day-glow orange workmen's overalls, and I suggested that we wear these for the gig just to have a different look. Daniel wasn't that into it, but he did go along with it. And then when Peter saw this orange manifestation, he fled.
Well, had he already sort of formed his aesthetic of, black flapping coats and sort of vampiric vibes?
Yeah, orange was not the new black at that point.
You said something like some of those bass lines that you learned when you studied all those funk songs kind of morphed and became part of Bauhaus songs.
It's really true, yeah, because I learned about 50 of those tracks, and yeah, they just went into my pool of resources.
Yeah.
Well, and it came out, not really sort of planning it. It just they were in there and they came out, but they came out in a kind of mutated way. So it was kind of like twisted disco. I refer to it as yeah. So you can hear that in there, but of course it's in a very different context to the original disco and funk records. It's more, it's juxtaposed with some very angular, kind of avant-garde, weird sounds. So it rubs up against them and makes something new.
Yeah, I mean, you guys did a lot of sort of experimental stuff with like prepared piano and drumsticks hitting, stringed instruments and stuff.
Yeah, we were
Did you
always reaching to make something original sounding.
and a lot of this was happening in the studio, like as a sort of inspired, in the moment composition.
Yeah.
You're a Brian Eno contemporary. Did you ever use his oblique strategies cards?
We did, but not until later with Love and Rockets. And then actually, I did employ them on our latest single, a single that we did remotely very recently. It was called "The New Wine," and which alludes to the surrealist parlor game, if you will, of the exquisite corpse, which is like,
Yes.
yes, consequences, like a consequences drawing where you fold a piece of paper into four sections and then you have four artists drawing a figure. So the head, the body, the legs, and the feet. and we applied that to music so that each of us had an allotted 1 minute of time to record whatever we wanted on 4 tracks, and then on the fifth minute we each had 2 tracks, and we, without hearing what the others had done, we laid down our tracks, and then at the end you reveal the figure, as it were, and there it is. So we did this actually a long time ago in Bauhaus. I came up with the idea, having read about the original surrealists, I
Yeah.
and applied it to music. And we did a song called 1, 2, 3, 4 with just our individual names. And then later on an album, we did a track called Exquisite Corpse, employing the
Hmm.
same technique. But for the most recent one, I personally used the oblique strategy cards all the way
And
through.
you did something sort of similar with Lilies and Remains, right? You wrote your dream down and
Well, that was something that just happened by accident, and I'm sure Andre Breton would have approved. In that, I wrote down a dream that I had the night before on a random piece of paper and stuck it in the studio and went off and tuned my bass. And Peter came in, and lo and behold, he writes down a dream he had on the other side of this sheet without looking. He hadn't turned it over, and he said, "I've just written this dream down." I said, "Really? Because turn that over, Peter." He said, what do you think that is?" I said, "I don't know. It's your handwriting." I said, "Yeah, it's the transcript of a dream I had."
talk about synchronicity.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Speaking of your funky bass lines, I have to say Mask is an incredibly funky record. Bela Lugosi's Dead, in a sense, is like a dub song. Would you agree with that? Like a dub reggae almost
Absolutely, that
song.
song would not exist in its form without dub. Yeah, very much so.
Are you a fan of Scientist and his dub
Absolutely, yeah,
Vampires record?
yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. In fact, scientists he does mixing at the Dub Club, which is just down the road from me here in Los Angeles.
Whoa,
And
really?
yeah, it's a joy to see him at the controls. Yeah, it's a great little club there, and they bring over some classic artists from Jamaica. Uh,
Wow.
the next
I'm
one
gonna
that's
go
happening
there.
next month, and it's Don Letts, who's over here to promote the documentary about him. And then that same night, he's going to go down and be the guest at the Dub Club. And yeah, it's always a good time and great sound system down there. And of course, Don, we go way back with Don. Don was a co-director of Bauhaus's video for Telegram Sam. Yeah. And Don also worked with The Clash, of course. He did the London Calling video and many others. I was a member of Big Audio Dynamite.
To get back to Bella's, I have to say, I have to ask you, you wrote the lyrics when you were riding your bike home from a warehouse gig?
Yeah, it was my day job. Yeah.
But you wrote them on labels, like mailing
Yeah, on the
labels?
packing labels that we would put on the boxes before we shipped them out. And I always had pockets full of these things. And that's all, I didn't have a pad, a notepad. I had a pencil. And so, yeah, that just came to me on the bike ride home. And I just started writing down the lines on these colored shipping labels. And by the time I got home, I had them all laid out on the table, and I had the lyric. Yeah, there it was.
Do you have those labels still?
So I do not. I transcribed it into a book and just threw the labels away, not thinking anything about
Man.
it. Yeah, yeah.
And then you had practice later that night,
I think it was the
and
next night. Yeah,
it almost just kind of sprung out, fully formed, right?
yeah. That is indeed true. Yeah, I just handed the sheet to Peter, and then the rest of us, as we would always do in those days, we just started to jam together, just without nothing premeditated, to see what would come out, and then that music just emerged, and then Peter started to intone the lyrics pretty much as you hear it on the record, and we recorded it very quickly after that.
Was the vocal cadence he chose and delivery what you were thinking of, or because it's almost like the way he sings it isn't how it looks on the page when I read your lyrics.
Yeah,
So it's just interesting. He probably interpreted it somewhat.
as he did with all the lyrics. Yeah, that we'll give them to him. I mean, he wrote most of the lyrics himself anyway.
And I love that your brother, Kevin Haskins, who played drum with Bauhaus, was like learning jazz drums, and he played a bossa nova beat.
He did, yes.
And I love bossa nova too, and I never
Yeah,
thought of it as a bossa nova beat, and now I can't help but think of it as a bossa nova song, which is pretty
yeah.
cool.
But a dubbed out over.
Yeah, dubbed out,
Yeah,
exactly.
we had a little echo unit called a WEM copycat, and we put the drums through that, the snare drum, the rim shots, and put some echo on that. Yeah,
And you had a like a fuzz box or something taped to your bass at that time, correct?
I did. Yeah, a little cheap fuzz box. Yeah,
What was it? Do you remember what kind of pedal it was?
but it wasn't a pedal. You couldn't stand on it. There was nothing to put your foot on. It had a little switch, so that's why it
Right,
stuck to my bass. I mean, because I didn't want to bend down and turn it on. So
right.
it's pretty easy. It's just practical, and it looked cool. But I started gaffer tape to my bass, and I could just switch it easy.
And it was just it was not like, I guess it wasn't branded like Super Fuzz or Fuzz Box, or I'm just curious what it
An
was, like what it was.
electro harmonics. It was a real cheap fuzz box.
Then you recorded the song like 6 weeks later or something, right, with Derek
Yeah,
Tompkins.
that's right. Effect Studio in Wellingborough. Yeah,
Can you talk about that session? He sounds like he was a really interesting person.
Derek was brilliant. Yeah, he really knew his stuff. Very experienced engineer. He built a lot of the equipment in that studio. And
Right.
was very open-minded as well. I mean, he was quite a bit older than us. We thought he was ancient. He was about 55. Yeah, like 10 years younger than me now.
Right.
But very open-minded, as I say, and also in Northampton there was a lot of Rastafarians, and so he would record a lot of these guys playing reggae. So he knew. So when we started putting the echoes on, he knew what that was about, and he actually had
Yes.
a great echo unit, this analog tape echo unit in the studio that was just wonderful, and that's what we used on the recording.
That also probably lent itself to, you're going to record it in a take. Like that's the style those guys work in. It's
Yeah,
happening in the moment.
vocals and
That
all. It wasn't like we put the music down and then Peter did the vocals. It was all done in one take, and that was actually the first time Peter ever sang into a studio mic.
that's crazy because he uses that mic along with his voice like
Yeah,
masterfully.
yeah, I agree. He was 21 at the time, as we all were. Well, my brother was 19.
Like when you joined Small Wonder Records, you kind of recorded a couple more songs to release Bella as like an EP by itself, as a 12-inch. Is that correct? Like
Yeah,
Boys.
yeah. We went back. We went back to London and recorded "Boys." We'd already recorded it at Beck, but we were under the naive delusion that we should go to a studio in London to make a proper recording, which is weird because I mean we recorded Bella at Beck and we knew that was great, but and in retrospect, looking back at the version we did at Beck, it's better than the one we did in London. Best thing that came out of that session, which we did with Small Wonder and with Pete Stennett, it was the guy behind Small Wonder in the studio, and we recorded the track really quickly. And he said, "Guys, while you're in the studio, let's just stick up a mic in the middle of the room and just play your set." And the set was really short at that time; it was about 6 songs, and we just hammered that down. And then that really has a kind of visceral excitement. And later on, we released that, as part of the Bella period.
Ballers, if you dug that, click subscribe and the bell so you don't miss part 2 of this fascinating interview where we talk about hanging out on the set of The Hunger with David Bowie. Super cool.